Welcome back. Let's continue our discussion now on a Sky News investigation which has revealed that almost 1 in 5 secondary school teachers in England have seen students with knives in their schools. Only 15% of the teachers in England polled said that they had received any formal training or guidance on how to deal with it. Joining me now is Shadow Education Minister Neil O'Brien. Mr O'Brien, good afternoon to you. Firstly, your reaction to that pretty stark figure that nearly 20% of teachers polled have seen knives in their schools.
It's completely horrifying. It's alarming for both pupils and for teachers too. I mean, teachers are professionals. They should not expect to see violence or be victims of violence at work any more than any other type of professional should. And that's why we've been trying this week to amend the schools bill to ensure that all acts of violence or threats of violence against teachers are reported to the police automatically. Now, sadly, the government voted down that amendment, which I thought was disappointing. And they also didn't take up our amendment to start recording in much greater detail the facts about violence in our schools. I mean, you, in your brilliant package, have found out this new information by using TeacherTapp, but you shouldn't have to do that. We should have a much better grip of the data about what's going on in our schools and the truth about both knife crime and also violence more generally in our schools.
It's interesting. Nice of you to compliment our report there. In it, a teacher who has been stabbed, who says that classrooms, in his mind, are less safe since that happened. I mean, you'd think that that would be a pretty salutary lesson, wouldn't you?
You would. Now, the data that we do have is a mixed picture. So it shows that over the last few years, hospital admissions for kids being stabbed are down, and the reports of that are down. But the data is limited, and I think there is something going on. I've talked to a couple of local head teachers recently, and they say to me, there is a thing about the combination of the knife culture and the phone culture. There is a sort of showing off. There is a fear of being in a fight and being filmed, not losing the fight. And that's why kids are carrying, amongst other things, there's a sort of showing off element of it, as well as a sort of a disturbing culture of kids either feeling that they want to carry or feeling that they need to carry weapons, which is incredibly disturbing. So much more needs to be done about disorder and violence in our schools, both to keep our kids safe, but also to keep good teachers in the profession. You've heard already in your package from people who have left the profession because of violence and disorder. And we know it's one of the main things that drives good teachers out of teaching in state schools. And so that's why we are pressing as we try and amend the schools bill, and we'll keep trying to do that as it goes through the Lords. That's why we are pressing for much more to be done on violence and discipline in our schools.
What's your understanding of why the government voted that down? Is it a resource issue?
I didn't get a particularly clear answer from the minister. There was a sort of perception that schools should report these things, but they don't always. And the reason why we want all acts of violence and threats of violence to be logged doesn't have to lead to criminalisation of kids, doesn't need to lead to a prosecution, is so we can build up a picture, firstly, so that we know what's going on. If someone is being repeatedly notified to the police because they are threatening a teacher, that needs to trigger some sort of action. But we also need to do it because kids need to know, young people, it might be 17 or whatever, need to know that there won't be tolerance of this, that teachers are not punch bags, they're not going to just suck it up, and they shouldn't be expected to, and that anything they do like that, be it a threat or an actual act of violence, is going to end up getting reported to the police. They've got to know that, because I think there's sometimes an expectation that, particularly for somewhat younger but still able to hurt you kids, that, oh well, we don't want to get them into trouble, and there's a bit of turning the other cheek, and we can't expect teachers to do that. We've got to keep both teachers and pupils safe in our schools. And I've heard, including from some people who should know better, oh, we can't automatically be excluding kids from schools for carrying knives. You can't have that policy. Well, we've got to reset the expectations, I think, now on children and knives. Things have got out of hand. The culture's got into the wrong place. And we now need to do some big salutary things in order to reset that culture and denormalize it. It wasn't normal when I was at school. It has become too normalized, and we now need to do some big, impactful things that will change that culture, break that culture really, and
Yeah.
get us back to a more sensible place.
Some of the schools, as reported in that package, have installed these metal detector arches at some cost. Our education reporter, who was a teacher herself for 20 years, says, well, you know, it's nice to have, but where there's a will, there's a way. If kids want to bring the knives in, they'll get them in. What do you say to that?
I thought it was really depressing to see knife archers being installed in schools. I'm not criticizing them for doing it. They should do whatever they think is right to keep kids safe. But we've got to solve the problem further back than that. We've got to solve it by solving the culture of knife carrying. I mean, even with adults. So we passed legislation in 2015 so that people would automatically go to jail if they had a repeat offence of carrying a knife. And this is for adults, right? And initially the courts complied with it and the share not going to jail dropped. But there's still 30% of people getting let off, and that's gone backwards over the last couple of years, where the courts are letting off maybe 40 odd percent of people who are repeat convicted of carrying a knife. Parliament's made it very clear that they should be going to jail automatically. These are adults, and yet the courts are not sending them to jail. So that's adults. That's one thing. That's bad enough. And I think for children who don't get those kind of sentences, we need to do something big to reset the culture, to make an example, I'm afraid, of young people, so that the word gets out that there are really significant consequences if you carry a knife. It's not a normalized thing. It's not a small thing. It's a huge thing, and that there will be huge consequences. Exactly how to do that, I think, is something we should debate. But there's no
Neil
question in my
O'Brien?
mind. We need to change the culture totally.
Neil O'Brien, good to talk to you.